We're in the British Museum looking at one of the real treasures of early medieval British history. This is the Sutton Hoo ship burial, which comes from East Anglia. It was found at a farm in the 20th century. I think it was 1938 that a series of mounds were excavated. It was a series of burials. Most of them had already been robbed, but the largest one, they found a ship in it. And in the ship was treasure, and we think originally the body of the man who owned this material. He would have lived at a moment when what would become England was in chaos.
The Roman Empire had fallen several hundred years earlier. England had been part of the Roman Empire, but then through a series of invasions of Germanic tribes, invasions from Denmark, England had become a series of different kingdoms.
Which were often at war with each other.
Which were often at war with each other. Various attempts were made by people like Ethelbert to unite those kingdoms. Also at this time, Germanic tribes and Danish tribes were Christianized in the 500s and 600s. So with the Sutton Hoo ship burial, we have some very rare artifacts from a period when there's not a lot of building, there's not a lot of painting. It's a very unstable period in medieval history.
You really get a sense of what that world was like from the things that we found in the burial. You find objects of warfare. You find this man's helmet, shield. It's also very finely wrought material. Probably one of the most famous objects is this purse lid,
which is made of gold and cloisonne.
Yeah, enamel cloisonne. The backing is a reconstruction.
Underneath it would have been a leather bag.
It's long gone. Right, the gold and the glass have survived. Let's take a close look at the style.
We have typical interlacing of abstract forms, also the introduction of animals. Along the bottom we have on either side, it's a very symmetrical design, frontal human figure who seems to be attacked on either side by wolves.
It looks pretty serious, yeah, you see that doubled, almost as if it's a kind of mirror. His mouth is open. He looks like he has a mustache. His face is a circle, ringed with a pattern that could almost function as hair. But the mouth is open almost as if it's a kind of scream or a kind of distress. His arms seem to be folded up, and then those animals, their mouths are open, they seem to be ready to devour, or perhaps to tell him a secret, one or the other.
It's impossible to really know what's going on. We read that expression on his face as one of horror, but who knows? Maybe this is a suggestion of power.
That caution that you just suggested is really important.
Yeah,
this is
really
all
have
conjecture.
no idea.
That's absolutely right. Let's go further inside, and you see a kind of bird of prey that seems to be attacking a more passive bird. Do you see that?
Perhaps
like a duck.
an eagle attacking another bird.
Perhaps a duck or something like that. There is this beautiful interlacing, as you called it, this kind of knotting, which we'll see in Hiberno-Saxon art. And then you've got this cloisonne, and in certain cases you've actually got garnet.
And so the cloisonne is this kind of division of areas using metal wire and then filling in those spaces in between with enamel.
It's interesting that almost everything in the ship burial has disintegrated. Almost everything has rotted. Even the bones of the man that would have been buried have dissolved. Really, what's survived is the enamel and the gold.
And we actually have the gold coins that were in this purse. And we're looking at something from the early 600s, from a period in European history when so little remains for us to understand what it was like during this period.
But we do get a sense of what their costume must have been like, from the purse lid, from the belt buckles, from the shoulder clasps.
Or at least the costume of a very wealthy, very powerful, likely king.
Sutton Hoo is a site in the southeast of England. Comprised of a series of mounds, these mysterious lumps in the landscape have long had stories gather around them. In 1939, the land was owned by Mrs. Edith Pretty, who, along with her friends, shared a staunch belief in spiritualism. The mounds of Sutton Hoo gained the spiritualists' interest because they claimed they could see shadowy figures walking amongst them. not least a man sat proudly on a horse atop one of the largest mounds in the set. In 1937, Mrs. Pretty hired the help of self-taught local archaeologist Basil Brown, and with the help of the gardener and the gamekeeper, the three of them set to excavating one of the larger mounds at Sutton Hoo. By the end of the summer of 1939, they had uncovered one of the largest ship burials in all of Europe. The site was believed to have been a burial mound for an ancient king, and soon they did come across what they believed to have been the burial site itself. The chamber had collapsed, and many of the objects within were in a state of decay. Still covered in mud, they had to be boxed up, however, because something was on the horizon. Within a month, the Second World War had been declared, and Germany brought with it the horrors of the Blitz upon London. Due to this, most of the finds from Sutton Hoo had to be hidden underground in a disused London tube station, and they remained there until 1947 or 1948. It was immediately obvious that Sutton Hoo had been a cultural as well as literal treasure trove of a find. Finely made objects such as solid gold belt buckles and solid gold and finely enamelled shoulder clasps were some of the most staggering objects in the collection. Even the so-called purse, which contained money, was in its own right a stunning work of art. The coins contained within spoke of relationships across the whole of Europe, including 37 coins from the Merovingian kings. The coins dated the grave to around 600 AD, and the other objects within, such as the finely crafted sword, seemed to jump straight from the pages of Beowulf. Every object was richly adorned with fine trappings and decorations. This, for example, is not a standalone treasure. It goes on the front of a shield, conceivably to be struck at with a sword. All told, the trappings of the Sutton Hoo burial mound told of a king who was well respected and loved, who loved gold and money, and who loved music. However, when British Museum curator Herbert Marion came to a series of metal plaques, he knew that this must have been the death mask for the king within the mound. Immediately there was an attempt to reconstruct what the helmet must have looked like. However, this reconstruction came to be extremely controversial, as it would have left its user exposed in battle. The neck and the face were barely protected at all. So, in 1968, the helmet was reconstructed by Rupert Bruce Mitford, the then keeper of medieval antiquities. It has since become an icon of Britain and a centrepiece of the British Museum. Millions now flock to see this treasure and muse over who the owner might have been. He is believed to have been King Raedwald, an early Christian Saxon ruler in the southeast of England. He commanded respect from his people and fostered vast trade networks across the known world. For better or worse, Sutton Hoo and the mask therein has come to represent for many the beginnings of Englishness in these islands of Britain. And for many more, King Raedwald's helmet is one of the first archaeological objects which we are introduced to in school. However, for many archaeologists, it is the story of how this site has survived the challenges and turmoils of the modern era that makes it most remarkable. Yes, Sutton Hoo and the objects contained within are truly incredible. But what is even more incredible is that these remnants of an ancient king survived to this day.